Voting is extended in Syria's landmark presidential election, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. The US president announces plans to invest $1 billion to beef up the American military presence in Eastern Europe. Egypt's former army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is declared the winner of last month's presidential election, securing over 96% of the vote. And Iranians prepare to commemorate the 25th anniversary, marking the passing of the founder of the Islamic Revolution. Hello there, you're watching AEE World News and I'm Fatima Basim. The Syrian High Electoral Committee has extended the voting period in the country's long-anticipated presidential elections until midnight. Millions of Syrian voters cast their ballots in the wake of a 3-year-long conflict. The decision will take effect in polling stations across Syria, where voter turnout has been extremely high, allowing more people to take part in the democratic process before the polls officially close. Our correspondent, Sen Al-Moussaoui, reports now on the election, which is expected to be won comfortably by incumbent President Bashar al-Assad. Syrians have pinned their hopes on the resilient leader to restore stability and security in the country.
Waving photos of their leader and dancing with flags, thousands of Syrians pledged renewed allegiance to President Bashar al-Assad as they voted on Tuesday in the country's presidential elections. Men and women said re-electing Assad would give the Syrian leader more legitimacy to find a solution to the devastating 3-year-old conflict that has thus far killed more than 160,000 people.
We have come today to vote for President Bashar al-Assad with our blood. We voted for Assad because we know for a fact that he will continue to fight terrorism and achieve victory over the foreign-backed militants.
Dr. Bashar al-Assad, God protect him, is our only hope. I voted for him with my blood because I am 100% sure that he will work hard to liberate all Syrian territory under militant control.
In Damascus, where the government fully controls the capital, people had to make their way through multiple checkpoints to cast their ballots. For thousands, this was a chance to pledge their full support to the president. Some even refused to go behind the curtain to cast their vote in privacy, instead publicly declaring their backing for Assad.
As you saw, I voted in public. I believe in him. He is the president of Syria and the protector of Syria. He is my leader and I love him.
Another lover of Assad is Lina Al-Jumani, a French resident and a Syrian national, who told Al-Ittijah TV that she traveled all the way from Paris to Damascus to vote for Assad.
We couldn't vote while we think that France is defending democracy in the world and defending the light of knowledge in the world. That's why we came here to vote, because it's our right and our duty to do. So we let down all our works and we came here.
Dr. Hassan al-Nouri, one of the 3 presidential candidates, casted his ballot in Damascus this morning and said that the elections were a sign of victory over terrorism in the country.
Until now, this process is transparent and democratic, and we are optimistic that we will make big gains given this huge turnout, which started this morning. I think this huge turnout will continue into the evening, and we may need to extend the elections by 1 day.
The balloting only took place in government-controlled areas, and Assad's win, all but a foregone conclusion, would give him a third 7-year term in office and likely further strengthen his determination to crush the insurgency against his rule. Braving mortar shells, car bombs and numerous threats of attacks, Millions of Syrians showed their strong participation in the elections, hoping their votes will contribute in ending the 3-year-old crisis. Outside Parliament building in Damascus, Hussein Al-Musawi, Al-Ittijah TV.
Well, that was Hussein Al-Musawi, who joins us now from the Syrian capital, Damascus. Hussein, if you can give us an estimate of the voter turnout today.
Yes, the first estimates of the turnout are very, very high. Of course, this is according to NGOs, independent NGOs and observers who attended the elections, international observers, independent international observers. I was able to speak to them today and a couple of minutes ago, and they told me that the number is between 70 and 75%. So that is considered to be a very large turnout. We're talking 15 million eligible voters, so that's between 12 to 13 million who took part in the process today. That number, of course, increased after the Syrian government announced that it will extend, and the voting is still ongoing as I speak now, extend it for 5 hours from 7 p.m. to midnight. So that number went up a bit from, it was around, before at 7 it was around 55%, now it's reached around 75%. So the voter turnout has been very high today. Of course, this is not official figures. This is according to NGOs, according to observers, independent observers who saw the elections and who were right beside those voting.
Yes, and are Syrians relieved that they were able to participate in these elections?
Yes, Syrians are very proud to be part of these elections. I mean, the main factor, or we can say the main motive behind their strong participation today is because they feel connected to this country. They feel connected to the soil of their country. They want to be part of this democratic change. They want to make sure that that they can write history. They're fed up with the terrorism. They're fed up with car bombs. They're fed up with mortar shells, with terrorists, with beheading, with all the acts of terrorism. So as I spoke to Syrians today, they said that this may be the only way out. So that's why they showed their strong participation. And another factor was the fact that with the government extended to 5 hours, that gave them another motive. For those sitting at home, they left their houses at night after the sunset. It's cold and it's not sunnier, and the temperature's gone down a bit, so they were able to go to polling stations. I was also told that the government, and this is not really circulated in the media, that those living in the high mountains, the elderly, the government also had cars, or if I can say vans, with movable, like with ballot boxes that move around from one area to another. For those who couldn't take part, the government went to them. I mean, with all the equipment and with all the boxes and with the ink, and the whole process was done outside their house. So the government also wanted a strong participation, and the participation was very strong. So the people really, as I said, they're fed up, and they want to be part of this democratic change because they know that this is they don't want the shells to land on them. They don't want violence, and they think that this may be the only way out.
Yes, and when are results expected to be announced?
I'm going to quote the governor of Damascus, who spoke live on the Syrian State TV around an hour ago. He said that the results may be announced within 48 hours. He said that he will call us journalists after the ballot, after 12 p.m. of course. So tomorrow morning he may call us journalists, and we will oversee the vote counting. He said that there will be a lot of NGOs, a lot of observers, and a lot of employees that work at ballot boxes that will oversee that we will also be able to see this. So he said, of course I'm quoting him here, he said that the results may come out within 48 hours. However, that's according to the governor. We're still waiting for an official statement to be released by the information minister, since the government has made public that all the information comes from the information minister, not through anyone else. So I think, as the governor of Damascus said, it is expected within 48 hours. I think the government of Damascus wants the results to be released as soon as possible in order to make sure that Western leaders and Western powers don't take advantage of this 24-48 hour gap. And we heard, I mean, the Americans and many European leaders calling the elections as a disgrace. So they want the results to come out. They want the Syrian people to come out on the street and celebrate the results. Therefore, they can say the people of Syria chose X or Y president.
Yes, and what have observers said about the voting process in terms of meeting international standards?
Yes, as I said before, they are NGOs and observers. However, they're independent. They're not part of the UN. They're not part of any official. They're not affiliated with any official country, or they are part of delegation. Well, I was able to speak to many today, and they said that the process was, I mean, they called it as legitimate. No fraud was recorded. Of course, the observers are only a couple of dozen. They're not more than that. I mean, I think I was told that there are around 70 to 80 observers that attended, some from Canada, some from Britain, and also some from Germany and some from Holland as well. All those who I spoke to said that the process was all right. There was the curtains. Most of the people voted behind the curtains. However, those who voted in front of the curtain, they chose to. So most of the observers said that the process did go in the right path. We can say no breach or no fraud was recorded, and most of the observers were proud with what they saw. Although, I mean, it's a new thing for the new generation here in Syria, since it's the first time in 50 years multi-candidates, Syrians vote for multi-candidates, since it was only referendums before. Syrians were able, because the Syrian State TV has been campaigning for a couple of months now, teaching the Syrian people how to vote and what to do. So the Syrians really went into the polling stations today with some slight information on what they should do. And the observers said it was a good process with no major fraud incidents really recorded, other than the violence that unfortunately was recorded in the capital and some parts of the country.
All right, Hussein Al-Mouswi, thank you for giving us those updates from Damascus. Meanwhile, Syrians residing in the city of Homs, which was once regarded as the birthplace of the insurgency, turned out in massive numbers to vote in those presidential polls. Today, the residents of the city, which has been left in ruins after years of fighting, appeared determined to keep President Assad in office.
It was from this city that the armed conflict against the Syrian government first began. But 3 years later, as thousands head to the polls to vote for their country's next leader, support for the militancy seems to have died down in Homs. Fleeing the violence, civilians here were forced to leave their homes. Now, they've returned to fight back.
This is a message to all the people who were in the old city and bore arms. You see, there are 3 candidates. Choose the one you want. Turn over your weapons, regain your senses, and we will rebuild Syria.
The old city of Homs has seen some of the worst violence since the outbreak of the conflict, but the Syrian government was eventually able to bring most of the city back under its control. At the Hassan al-Sabit school, the ballot boxes are getting full as more and more voters pour in to participate.
By 3:30 p.m., 597,000 of the 1.18 million registered voters in Homs province had cast their ballots. Elsewhere in the province, it was only in the opposition-held towns of Talabise and Rastan that voting could not take place.
From a city that was once a main battleground for the Syrian government and armed militants, a sense of hope has arisen that the voice of the people would determine the fate of the country.
Well, the scene at the Lebanese-Syrian border crossing was just as busy as thousands of Syrian refugees who have fled to Lebanon briefly went back to their war-torn country to cast their ballots. Syrian authorities have set up polling stations on the Syrian side of the border to give refugees the chance to vote. Syrian airports are also accommodating voters who were prevented from participating in the country's presidential elections in various foreign states.
I'm going to elect a president for the Syrian Arab Republic. I came undecided on this for myself and my nation. It is a national duty to vote so we can overcome this crisis in Syria. There is an international war against our country.
We want to vote for Syria, even if we lose our status as refugees. We are not refugees anyway. There are a lot of those people here who are not benefiting from the United Nations or any association. Those displaced, that they consider displaced, were displaced by the terrorist groups, not the state.
For his part, Syria's Foreign Minister Walid al-Muallim has hailed the massive turnout in the country's historic presidential elections. As he cast his ballot, Muallim said that a political solution to the crisis begins today, dubbing the vote democratic and transparent. Muallim said that Damascus has invited a group of monitors from various countries, but excluded the Arab League because it has conspired against the Syrian government since the beginning of the conflict. Well, as Syrians poured out in their millions to vote, foreign-backed militant groups have continued to target the capital Damascus with mortar shells. More than 20 rounds hit several residential neighborhoods, including Al-Mazeh and Al-Mazra, and the Christian majority areas of Ghassani and Qasab. The attacks have caused some minor injuries among civilians and moderate material damage. This as the Syrian army has continued to push ahead with its offensive against militant groups in the north of the country. In Aleppo, government troops have liberated more than 9 towns in the countryside of the northern province, killing and injuring scores of insurgents. The army regained control of the Air Defense Brigade located on Aleppo's international highway and several towns including Azan and Al-Safariya, following a security operation which lasted all night. Dr. Hussein Gharbia joins us now from our Beirut studios. He is a professor at the Lebanese University. Dr. Gharbia, first off, is a victory for President Bashar al-Assad a foregone conclusion?
Well, I think it's a victory for Syria rather than President Assad. President Assad has proven how strong he is by the will of his people, by the will of the army, of the Syrian army, and I think a victory for President Assad is very likely, and he will be leading the country for the next few years.
And will the elections change anything on the ground?
Oh, definitely, definitely. This election came as a shock to all those who participated in the war for the past 3 years in Syria to topple the regime and to finish off President Assad. This election has shown to the world that the Syrian people are backing up the government and the president and the Syria as such. So this election is a unique one in such a critical situation in the Middle East and in Syria in particular, and came as a shock, as I said, to those who are anti the Syrian system.
So will this give the government a boost in its fight against the militants?
It's definite that the Syrian army will continue its duty to get rid of these militants who actually destroy the country, and with no agenda, with no political agenda. Rather, they are just terrorists. In my opinion, they are terrorist groups who the main objective is looting and killing and turning Syria into different small states with no clear objective for the future.
What sort of challenges to its legitimacy is this government going to face, given that a sizable portion of the population is not participating in the polls?
Still, the number who turned out to vote for the past few days is huge regarding the percentage of those eligible to vote. Unlike, for instance, Egypt, who are under 50% of the voters who turned out. Syria, in such a state, as the news mentioned, over 70% turned out from those eligible to vote. So I think the message is clear. The Syrian people has sent a message to the whole world, particularly to the democratic world, who actually condemn what's going on in Syria now, and they see the elections a fraud or nonsense, which is ridiculous to hear that from such democratic countries, leading democratic countries in the world.
All right, thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. Dr. Hussein Gharbia, professor at the Lebanese University. Well, the ongoing crisis in Ukraine is taking on an increasingly bloody dimension as Kiev steps up its military operations against pro-Russian activists in the east of the country. For its part, Moscow is pushing for a political solution to the crisis while calling for humanitarian corridors to be opened in the conflict-affected areas.
Another strike. This time it is the residents of Slavyansk who are enduring the heavy bombardment of Kiev's combat aircraft. The stains of blood and the destruction inflicted upon the buildings are hard to miss, but rather than questioning the morality of their actions, the authorities in the Ukrainian capital appear to be spurred on by such images.
The aim of the anti-terrorist operation is to stop terrorism, to stop the destruction of people, to stop soldiers of another country who are killing, torturing and raping. The aim of the operation is to stop this crime. This crime will be stopped.
One of the airstrikes hit a roadblock manned by pro-Russian activists. Another targeted civilians in the village of Semyonovka. Locals said at least one person was killed, while scores have been injured since the sunrise. The number of those killed since violence erupted in the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions has reportedly surpassed 180. That number has disturbed a few of Kiev's western backers, but Moscow is calling for action.
Our draft demands the immediate cessation of hostilities, urges parties to commit themselves to a sustainable ceasefire, and calls for the establishment by the parties of humanitarian corridors in order to allow the civilian population to live safely and to ensure humanitarian assistance.
The proposal was, however, rejected by the Ukrainian side.
The very fact that the resolution on Ukraine is tabled by Russian Federation is cynical and immoral. A country that has recently occupied and annexed a part of the territory of Ukraine, a country sponsoring terrorism and unrest in the eastern regions of Ukraine, now offers a settlement plan.
For the time being, at least, the situation in Ukraine looks set to worsen, as Kiev appears dead set on annihilating dissent in the east, relying on Western backing for political cover.
In a joint press conference with his Polish counterpart in Warsaw, US President Barack Obama has unveiled a new $1 billion plan to finance additional US troop, air and naval rotations in Eastern Europe. Obama also announced that Washington will be stepping up cooperation with non-NATO member states like Ukraine and Georgia amid the worst East-West standoff since the Cold War.
We'll increase the number of American personnel, Army and Air Force units, continuously rotating through allied countries in Central and Eastern Europe. And we will be stepping up our partnerships with friends like Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia as they provide for their own defense. I'm calling on Congress to approve up to $1 billion to support this effort, which will be a powerful demonstration of America's unshakable commitment to our NATO allies.
Obama has landed in Poland's capital Warsaw, where he is set to hold meetings with the Polish president and prime minister. Meanwhile, a White House statement proposed a $1 billion plan to finance additional US troop, air and naval rotations to, quote, new allies in Eastern Europe, amid an East-West showdown over Ukraine. According to the White House, after the required approval by Congress, the plan would also build the capacity of non-NATO states such as Ukraine and Georgia to work with the United States and the Western Alliance and build their own defenses. Though Obama's big meeting will come on Wednesday, when he meets Ukraine's embattled President-elect Petro Poroshenko. The ex-Soviet state, on the verge of economic collapse and threatened by civil war, has its new pro-Western leadership grasping for Washington's support. After Poland, Obama will travel to Brussels to attend the G7 summit, which will be dominated by a US push to a sometimes reluctant Europe to maintain economic pressure on Russia. The US and the European Union have already imposed an embargo on a number of Russian businesses and individuals, with the Western powers pushing to sanction Russia's key economic sectors. Obama's most sensitive part of the trip will come when he finally travels to France on Friday to mark the 70th anniversary of D-Day. Russian President Vladimir Putin has also been invited to the D-Day ceremonies. But both the Kremlin and the White House have said that no meetings between Obama and Putin are being planned. However, senior White House aides have not ruled out an informal encounter, which would be the first for the rivals since the Ukraine crisis mushroomed into the worst East-West standoff since the Cold War.
Meanwhile, a Kremlin aide announced that Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet German Chancellor Angela Merkel on Friday in France, where a number of world leaders are set to attend D-Day commemorations. According to the Kremlin statement, Putin and Merkel spoke over the phone and exchanged opinions over the Ukraine crisis. The leaders also discussed ongoing talks between Russia, the European Union and Ukraine over Moscow's threats to cut off Kiev's gas supply due to unpaid debts. You're watching AEE TV World News, still to come. A knife in the back. The Israelis lash out at Washington for recognizing the new Palestinian unity government. Welcome back to AEE TV World News. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Voting is extended in Syria's landmark presidential election, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. The US president announces plans to invest $1 billion to beef up the American military presence in Eastern Europe. Egypt's army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is declared the winner of last month's presidential election, securing over 96% of the vote. And Iranians prepare to commemorate the 25th anniversary marking the passing of the founder of the Islamic Revolution. A short-lived ceasefire was broken by the Yemeni army as they continued the aerial bombardment of Houthi positions in the north of the country. At least 120 people were killed on Monday in the latest round of fighting between Houthi rebels and government forces. The clashes mark a worsening security situation in the already volatile country.
The turmoil in Yemen is deepening after army fighter jets bombarded Houthi positions around the northern city of Amran, rendering a short-lived ceasefire void. There are no reports on the number of casualties from the airstrikes. But fighting over the last 24 hours resulted in the death of at least 120 people. Clashes erupted after troops tried to expel Houthi rebels from a strategic position near Amran. The army, which has been fighting Al-Qaeda militants in the south, was aided by Islah Party fighters, who are affiliated with the extremist group. The Houthi rebels, known also as Ansarullah, retaliated by attacking telecom installations and blocked traffic on the main Amran-Sana'a road. The Air Force intervened to aid the army and loyalist fighters. Officials reported that Yemeni warplanes bombed positions held by Houthi fighters, killing around 100 of them, while at least 20 government soldiers were killed. Yemen's Houthi movement, which draws its name from the tribe of its founding leader Hussein Badruddin al-Houthi, has been fighting against the central government in Sana'a for years. The Shia fighters blame the government for political, economic and religious marginalization of the country's Shia community and violating their civil rights. Clashes have repeatedly erupted in the past months between government troops and Houthis, as Sana'a struggles to restore nationwide control over a country where division into separate federal states appears to be the only peaceful way out.
Let's speak to our Sana'a correspondent Mohammed Al-Attab. Mohammed, the ceasefire has been broken. What does the fighting look like at the moment?
Yes, the situation now in Amran is still escalating, and the clashes are still continuing. And in spite that in the morning both parties have reached a ceasefire agreement. Today or night, the leader of the Houthis have issued a statement or delivered a speech, and during which he explained about what is going on in Amran. He said that the government's participation with the warplanes attacking the targets of the Houthis is announcing that there is a second war that will be waged against the Houthis. He said that he said that the President Abdul Mansur Hadi is under pressure by Islah and other influential people who are trying to push the army into a second war against the Houthis. He declared today he's going to release around 100 soldiers as a sign of he's willing he's willing to stop the war in Amran, and with one condition, that the army or the people who are fighting the Houthi group to be put under the leadership of another commander who is not affiliated to any partisan or sectarian relations.
Yes, and how many of the fighters who are battling with the army are Al-Qaeda militants?
Regarding this question, that what is going on in the south, the government is trying to fight Al-Qaeda in the south and to drive them from the strategic regions there. Also, there are many observers are saying that the same mentality and ideologies of the same people who are fighting with Al-Qaeda also are fighting against the Houthis and supported by the 310 military brigades in Amran. So the situation is contradictory. The observers are saying that what is going on in the south, that the government is fighting the Al-Qaeda, and where in the north the government is fighting along with the people who are suspected to be members of Al-Qaeda.
All right, thank you for those updates, Mohammed Al-Attab, our Sana'a correspondent. The official results from Egypt's presidential elections have been announced, with former Army Chief Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi securing the country's top job. The Election Commission announced that Sisi won Egypt's presidential elections by a landslide, securing 96.9% of the vote, while his sole rival, leftist politician Hamdin Sabahi, received only 3% of the vote, setting off celebrations in Cairo's Tahrir Square.
Based on this information, the winner of the position of President of the Arab Republic of Egypt in the elections held abroad on the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th and 19th of May for the year 2014 and inside Egypt on the 26th, 27th and 28th of May 2014 is Mr. Abdel Fattah Said Hussein Khalil al-Sisi.
My emotions are mixed with happiness and aspiration, my happiness for what you have achieved, and my aspiration to be worthy of your trust. I'm looking forward to your efforts and determination in building the upcoming stage.
Well, as soon as those results were announced in Egypt, Saudi King Abdullah hailed Sisi's victory as a historic day, calling for a donors' conference to help Cairo through its economic troubles. King Abdullah, whose wealthy monarchy has been a strong ally of Cairo following the overthrow of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi, said Sisi's sweeping win represents a new stage for the country. The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, has warned of plots against Islamic countries. Addressing the participants at the International Quran competition in the Iranian capital Tehran, the leader also said that Muslim nations should know that plots by their enemies today are more complicated than ever before. Iranians are observing the 25th anniversary of the passing of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Khomeini was the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979 and is remembered as one of the nation's most defining figures.
In their millions, Iranians are commemorating the 25th anniversary of the passing of the Islamic Republic's architect Imam Ruhollah Khomeini. Iranians appear to busily bustle about their capital as the country prepared to hold events marking the historic date. People and officials annually mass in and around the shrine where the Imam has been laid to rest in the south of Tehran. Millions of Iranians from around the country travel, some on foot, to pay tribute and show their adoration for the late Imam in a commemoration ceremony due to be held on Wednesday. The leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, will be the chief speaker in the gathering this year. Also, the country's president, Sheikh Hassan Rouhani, as well as Imam Khomeini's grandson, Hujjatullah Sayyid Hassan Khomeini, will give a speech on the annual occasion. Few could have guessed that an elderly man of 78 living in exile in Paris with his devoted followers would be the spearhead of a revolution which was to sweep through Iran. Surrounded by crowds of cheering men and women trying to get a glimpse of him, Imam Khomeini returned to Iran in 1979, following 14 years in exile to lead the historic Islamic Revolution. 10 years after leading the uprising that put an end to the Pahlavi regime, Imam Khomeini passed away on June 3, 1989. Decades later, the leaders returned to the Islamic Republic and the subsequent Iranian Revolution he led are still considered among the central events of the late 20th century.
A group of 21 pro-democracy protesters have been handed down 15-year jail sentences by a Bahraini court amid an ongoing crackdown against anti-regime demonstrations. Al-Wifaq, the largest opposition party in the country, stated that the defendants were tortured during their interrogation. The lengthy prison sentences come after the acquittals of a number of police officers who had been accused of killing protesters in February of 2011. The Iraqi army has continued with its full-scale military operation against militant groups in a number of cities, including Fallujah in the western province of Anbar. Government troops are looking to root out militants belonging to the Al-Qaeda offshoot of the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. Earlier in the day, ongoing clashes between the army and the ISIL left at least 47 militants dead. The Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah held his first cabinet meeting for the newly formed unity government. The premier praised the recent U.S. recognition of the consensus government, which has left Israeli officials deeply dismayed, describing the move as a knife in the back.
The Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah has called the U.S. recognition of a new Palestinian unity government encouraging after concluding the first meeting of his new cabinet.
We received many positive signals from too many states, too many countries, from the Arab states, the Muslim states. Even the statement which was issued by the State Department yesterday, it was very encouraging actually.
The U.S. State Department said earlier it would work with the new government and cautiously pledged to continue to disperse aid to the Palestinians while monitoring its policies.
Well, at this point, it appears that President Abbas has formed an interim technocratic government that does not include ministers affiliated with Hamas. Moving forward, we will be judging this government by its actions. Based on what we know now, we intend to work with this government, but we'll be watching closely to ensure that it upholds the principles that President Abbas reiterated today.
But the announcement has angered the Israelis as they lashed out at the formation of the new government, saying that the intra-Palestinian unity deal should be cancelled if peace is to be achieved.
Israel is deeply disappointed with the comments yesterday from the US State Department that the United States will work with the new Palestinian government backed by Hamas.
The Israeli-Palestinian peace talks, which began in July, had been stalled before they were suspended amid ongoing Israeli settlement construction on occupied Palestinian land.
Well, both the European Union and Britain have welcomed the formation of that Palestinian unity government. The UK Foreign Secretary, William Hague, said that his country's support for the unity government depends on its commitment to peace principles. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton called the formation an important step for the process of Palestinian reconciliation, adding that the bloc's engagement with the new Palestinian Authority will be based on its adherence to its previous commitments. In the latest act of aggression perpetrated by Israeli occupation forces, a Palestinian man was shot dead in the West Bank. The incident marks yet another example of the decades-long brutality against the Palestinian nation.
As the day came to an end in the West Bank, so did the life of another Palestinian at the hands of Israeli occupation forces. The man is Ala Aoudeh, a 30-year-old mobile phone shop owner. His relatives who witnessed what happened say he was at the checkpoint awaiting a delivery of phones when he was shot in cold blood. For his part, the newly appointed Palestinian Prime Minister Rami Hamdallah condemned the shooting.
About the matter today, at the Zatara checkpoint, this is a daily happening, nothing new. Every day, there is a violation, and there are prisoners and murders. We condemn these workings, and we ask all the international organizations to pressure Israel to stop these things against our people.
It's Hamdallah's first condemnation since the new unity government was sworn in hours earlier. It's an act he'll have to get used to, with daily assaults by Israeli occupation forces against Palestinians. Aside from the brutal killings of Palestinians of all ages, nearly 5,000 are currently languishing in Israeli jails. Most have been detained without a trial or being charged. According to the Palestinian Prisoners Society, some 120 Palestinian prisoners are now on hunger strike as a result. Global human rights organizations reported that Palestinian detainees have not only undergone physical or psychological torture, but have also been publicly humiliated, at times in the presence of their families.
Here's a reminder of tonight's top stories. Voting is extended in Syria's landmark presidential election, widely expected to return President Bashar al-Assad to office. The US president announces plans to invest $1 billion to beef up the American military presence in Eastern Europe. Egypt's former army chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is declared the winner of last month's presidential election, securing over 96% of the vote. And Iranians prepare to commemorate the 25th anniversary, marking the passing of the founder of the Islamic Revolution. Well, that's all from me and the AEE TV news team. Thank you very much for watching and good night.